Picture this. You're carrying your grandmother's sweet potato casserole recipe, the one that takes 4 hours to make from scratch, walking up to your childhood home where you've celebrated every Thanksgiving for 35 years. Your kids are bouncing beside you, excited to see their grandparents. You knock on the door that you used to walk through freely, and when your mother opens it, she looks genuinely surprised to see you. Not happy surprised, just surprised. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Like you're the pizza delivery guy who showed up at the wrong address. That was my reality this past Thanksgiving. But here's the twist nobody saw coming, including my own family. I had something in my purse that would change everything. Something that would flip the entire dynamic of who belonged in that house and who didn't. And before the turkey was carved, I'd show them exactly what happens when you bite the hand that literally feeds you. The morning sun filtered through the passenger window of my Honda Civic as Tommy adjusted his clip-on tie for the third time. He'd insisted on dressing up for Thanksgiving at Grandma and Grandpa's house, even though I'd told him it wasn't necessary. Lily sat behind him, carefully balancing a construction paper turkey she'd made at school. Its feathers a rainbow of handprints she'd collected from her entire first-grade class. I parked behind Kevin's lifted truck in the driveway of 4247 Maple Street, the same spot I'd been parking in since I got my driver's license. The house looked different somehow. New shutters framed the windows, painted a deep forest green that I didn't remember choosing. Actually, I definitely didn't remember choosing, because I would have been consulted on any major exterior changes. At least I would have been before. Ashley's white Mercedes sat in what used to be my dad's spot in the garage. Through the open door, I could see Dad's workbench had been pushed aside to make room for her collection of seasonal decorations. Orange and burgundy garlands hung from every available surface, and a wooden sign proclaimed "Blessed and Grateful" in cursive letters that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Tommy grabbed the casserole dish from my lap while Lily clutched her turkey art project. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one more time, smoothing down my hair and adjusting the neckline of the navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for today. It was the kind of dress that said, "I'm doing fine," without trying too hard to prove it. The kind that cost more than I should have spent, but less than I wanted to spend, striking that careful balance of post-divorce rebuilding. My purse sat heavy on my shoulder, and I could feel the weight of the folded papers tucked into the interior pocket. I'd been carrying them for weeks now, not really planning to use them, but somehow unable to leave them at home. They felt like insurance, though I wasn't sure against what. The front door opened before we reached it, and Ashley appeared in a flowing burgundy top that probably cost what I made in a week. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves that looked effortless, but definitely weren't, and her makeup was camera-ready despite it being barely 11 in the morning. She smiled at the kids with genuine warmth, then looked at me with something that wasn't quite a smile. "Sarah, you made it!" Her voice carried that particular tone people use when they're trying to sound enthusiastic, but mostly sound surprised. "I wasn't sure if you'd gotten the message about the time change." I blinked. "What time change?" "Oh, didn't your mom call? We moved everything up an hour because David has to leave early for his mother's house." She stepped aside to let us in, but her body language suggested she was doing us a favor. "But don't worry, we saved you some appetizers." The living room hummed with conversation and laughter. Kevin was sprawled across Dad's recliner, feet up, holding court with some story that had Uncle David chuckling and nodding along. He'd gained weight since moving back home, and his face had that soft, untroubled look of someone who'd forgotten what real responsibility felt like. Ashley perched on the arm of the chair like she belonged there, like this was their furniture in their house. Dad stood by the window, wearing the cardigan I'd bought him last Christmas, but his posture seemed smaller somehow. Mom bustled around the kitchen island, arranging appetizers on serving platters, her movements quick and nervous. When she saw me, her smile was brief and distracted. "Oh good, you brought the sweet potato casserole." She took the dish from Tommy without really looking at me. Though I should mention, Ashley made one too. Hers has a pecan crumble topping that everyone's been raving about. I watched my grandmother's recipe get relegated to the counter beside the microwave, while Ashley's version sat prominently on the dining room table. The table that could easily seat 8 people but today was set for exactly 7. 7 place settings with the good china. 7 wine glasses catching the light from the chandelier. 7 cloth napkins folded into perfect triangles. Michelle emerged from the hallway, looking polished and put together in a way that suggested her marriage had only added to her confidence rather than testing it. She hugged me quickly, the kind of hug that's technically affectionate but doesn't commit to any real warmth. "How are you holding up?" she asked, and there was something in her tone that made it sound like I was recovering from a terminal illness rather than a divorce. "I'm doing really well, actually." I kept my voice light, refusing to take the bait. "Work's been busy, the kids are settling into their new school great, and we love our apartment." "That's good." She nodded in that patronizing way people do when they think you're putting on a brave face. "It must be nice to have your independence." Before I could respond, Kevin's voice boomed from the living room. "Yo, Sarah, come settle an argument. Ashley says you used to be scared of the dark until you were like 12. I said it was 10. Heat crept up my neck. This was how conversations went now, apparently. My childhood fears presented as entertainment. My past self offered up for collective amusement. I could feel my kids watching me, trying to understand why their uncle was talking about their mom like she wasn't standing right there. "I think I'll help in the kitchen instead," I said, guiding Tommy and Lily toward the safety of Mom's bustling activity. But even there, I felt like a guest who'd overstayed their welcome. Mom had developed a system with Ashley, an efficient rhythm of food preparation that didn't include me. When I offered to help with the turkey, Mom waved me away. When I suggested we start the rolls, Ashley was already pulling them from the oven. Everything was handled, managed, under control without my input. Tommy tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, where do we sit?" I looked toward the dining room again, counting place settings, like maybe I'd miscounted the first time. 7 chairs around a table that had hosted 8, 10, sometimes 12 people during past Thanksgivings. 7 places for 7 people. And apparently, my kids and I weren't among them. Ashley appeared at my elbow, following my gaze. "Oh, we thought maybe you'd be more comfortable in the den with the kids. We set up TV trays and everything. There's a kids' movie marathon on Disney+. TV trays?" I repeated the words slowly, trying to make sense of them. "Well, you know how it is with little ones. They're happier with their own space. And this way the adults can have grown-up conversation without worrying about little ears." She said it like she was doing me a favor, like she'd solved a problem I didn't know I had. Lily looked up at me with confusion in her 6-year-old eyes. She'd been looking forward to sitting at the big table, using the fancy plates, being part of the family celebration. Tommy's face had gone carefully blank, which was worse than disappointment. He was learning to protect himself from expectations that led to hurt. "Actually," I said, my voice steady despite the tightness in my chest, "I think there might be some confusion about the seating arrangement." Ashley's smile faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" I could feel the weight of the papers in my purse again, that insurance policy I'd been carrying without knowing why. Around us, the family continued their pre-dinner preparations, unaware that something fundamental was about to shift. "I mean," I said loud enough that conversations in both the kitchen and living room began to quiet, "that this is still my house." The silence that followed was the kind that makes you aware of every small sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, the distant sound of football announcers on the television. Kevin's laugh from the living room sounded forced and too loud. "What are you talking about, Sarah?" Mom's voice carried a warning, like I was about to embarrass myself and she was trying to help me avoid it. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded papers I'd been carrying like a talisman. The deed to the house. The deed with my name on it, dated 6 months ago, the day I'd saved my parents from foreclosure without telling anyone, because I'd known they were too proud to accept charity from their recently divorced daughter. "I'm talking about the fact that I own this house," I said, unfolding the papers with steady hands. "I bought it 6 months ago when you were facing foreclosure. I've been paying the mortgage ever since, letting you live here rent-free, because I thought that's what family did for each other." Dad's face went pale. Mom dropped the serving spoon she'd been holding. Kevin's feet hit the floor as he sat up straight in the recliner that was, technically, mine. That's impossible, Ashley said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. I held up the deed so everyone could see it. Henderson and Associates handled the paperwork. The bank was 3 weeks away from starting foreclosure proceedings when I stepped in. I liquidated my retirement account, used the settlement money from my divorce, and borrowed against my own credit to make this happen. Michelle moved closer, her eyes scanning the legal documents. Sarah, why didn't you tell us? Because I knew you'd try to stop me. Because I knew Dad would rather lose the house than accept help from his daughter. Because I thought I was doing the right thing. I folded the papers back up, my hands surprisingly steady. And because I never imagined I'd be treated like a stranger in the house I own. Kevin stood up slowly, his face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and something that might have been anger. You're saying you own this place? I'm saying I saved this place. I'm saying that while you've been living here rent-free for 3 years, redecorating and acting like it's yours, I've been working 60-hour weeks to keep the mortgage current. I'm saying that every improvement you've made, every change you've implemented, has been to my house. Ashley's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck. We didn't know. Your parents never said anything about losing their home? About facing bankruptcy because of medical bills? About being too proud to ask for help? I looked around the room at these people I loved, these people who'd just tried to banish me to TV trays and children's movies in my own house. No, they wouldn't have said anything. That's why I had to find out from their mortgage company when I was listed as an emergency contact. Mom finally found her voice. Sarah, we never asked you to. You didn't ask me to do anything, Mom. You didn't ask me to help when Dad had his heart attack. You didn't ask me to co-sign the medical loan. You didn't ask me to take over your finances when the bills got overwhelming. You never asked me for anything, and then you act surprised when I show up anyway. Tommy moved closer to me, his small hand finding mine. He didn't understand all the adult complications, but he understood that his mom was upset, and that seemed to be enough for him to pick a side. So what happens now? David asked quietly. He'd been silent through the whole exchange, probably wishing he'd chosen his own mother's house for dinner. I looked around the dining room with its 7-place settings, its careful exclusion, its assumption that I didn't belong. Now we're going to reset this Thanksgiving. We're going to use all the good china. We're going to set places for everyone who wants to be here. We're going to act like the family we're supposed to be. And if we don't? Kevin's question came out more challenging than curious. I met his eyes directly. Then you can find somewhere else to spend the holidays. And maybe somewhere else to live while you're at it. The silence stretched between us like a held breath. Finally, Mom moved toward the dining room. I'll get more place settings, she said quietly. Ashley started to protest, but Kevin put a hand on her arm. Ash, maybe we should just... Go with it. Go with it. Her voice pitched higher. She can't just show up and threaten to kick us out of our home. It's not our home, Dad said suddenly. His voice was rough, like the words hurt coming out. It never was. We've been living here on borrowed time, and our daughter saved us from losing everything. The least we can do is set her a place at her own table. Michelle grabbed wine glasses from the cabinet without being asked. David started folding additional napkins. Even Kevin got up and moved extra chairs from the garage, though he avoided looking at me while he did it. Tommy helped me carry the good silverware while Lily carefully arranged. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The salt and pepper shakers. It took 20 minutes to reset the table for 9 people instead of 7. 20 minutes during which no one spoke about anything significant, but everything changed anyway. When we finally sat down to dinner, I found myself at the head of the table where Dad usually sat. He'd taken the seat to my right without comment, and Mom had claimed the spot to my left. My sweet potato casserole sat next to Ashley's version, and people took portions of both without making comparisons. The conversation stayed careful and surface level, but it stayed respectful too. Kevin didn't make jokes at my expense. Ashley didn't treat my children like inconveniences. Michelle asked genuine questions about Tommy's school and Lily's art projects. During dessert, Dad cleared his throat. Sarah, I need to say something. The table went quiet again, but this time it felt expectant rather than tense. What you did for us. Buying this house, keeping us afloat. We never should have taken that for granted. And we sure as hell never should have made you feel unwelcome here. He looked around the table. This is your house. It's been your house for 6 months. We've been guests, and we forgot how to act like grateful ones. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. We got comfortable, she said simply. And we let other people make decisions about our family without consulting the person who made it all possible. Ashley pushed her dessert around her plate without eating it. I feel terrible, she said finally. I was trying to help, trying to make things nice, but I never considered. I should have realized. You couldn't have known, I said, and meant it. But now you do. Kevin had been quiet through most of dinner, but finally he looked up from his pie. So what happens now? Do Ashley and I need to find another place? It was the question everyone had been thinking, but no one had wanted to ask. I considered it seriously, looking around the table at these complicated people who were my family despite everything. That depends, I said finally. This arrangement has been working because everyone assumed it was temporary, but if it's going to continue, it needs to work for everyone. Including me. What would that look like? Mom asked. It looks like me being included in decisions about the house I own. It looks like my kids being welcomed at family gatherings, not shuffled off to watch movies. It looks like respect going both ways. I met each of their eyes in turn. And it looks like Kevin getting a job. Kevin's face flushed. Sarah, it's not that easy. It's been 3 years, Kev. 3 years of Ashley working part-time while you figure yourself out. 3 years of Mom and Dad covering your expenses. 3 years of me paying a mortgage on a house where you live rent-free. My voice stayed calm, but my words were firm. If you want to keep living here, you contribute. Get a job, any job, and start paying rent. Not market rate, not what you'd pay anywhere else, but something that shows you understand this isn't a free ride anymore. Ashley nodded quickly. That's fair. That's completely fair. And the redecorating stops unless I approve it first. This isn't your house to redecorate however you want. Of course, Ashley said again. Tommy had been listening to all of this with the intense focus that 8-year-olds bring to adult conversations they're not supposed to understand. Finally, he spoke up. Does this mean we can come here for Christmas? The question was so innocent, so hopeful, that it cut through all the adult complications and got to the heart of what mattered. This little boy just wanted to know if his family would be together for Christmas. Yes, baby, I said, ruffling his hair. We can come here for Christmas. Can we help decorate the tree? I looked around the table at these people who'd just learned that their family dynamics had been built on assumptions that were never true. We can help with everything. After dinner, everyone helped clear the table without being asked. Kevin and David loaded the dishwasher, while Ashley and Michelle wrapped leftovers. Mom and I stood at the kitchen sink, washing the serving dishes that wouldn't fit in the dishwasher, falling into a rhythm we'd established decades ago. I'm sorry, she said quietly, scrubbing the turkey platter with more force than necessary. I'm sorry we made you feel unwelcome. I'm sorry we didn't include you in planning. I'm sorry you had to save our house and then fight for a seat at your own table. I'm not sorry I saved the house, I said. I'm just sorry it took this long for everyone to know about it. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I considered the question while drying a wine glass. Because I wanted to give you time to get back on your feet without feeling indebted. Because I thought Kevin would find work and things would naturally balance out. Because I hoped you'd include me in decisions without me having to demand it. And when it became clear that wasn't happening, I guess I kept hoping it would change. Right up until today, when I realized it was getting worse instead of better. Mom handed me the platter to dry. What changed today? Today I realized my kids were watching me accept being treated like a second-class citizen in my own house. Today I realized I was teaching them that this is how families work, that some people matter more than others, that love means accepting whatever scraps you're offered. I set the platter in the cabinet where it belonged. I couldn't let them learn that lesson. Through the kitchen window, I could see Tommy and Lily in the backyard with their grandfather, helping him rake leaves into piles they immediately jumped into. Dad was laughing, actually laughing, in a way I hadn't seen since before his heart attack. "He's been different since you bought the house," Mom said, following my gaze. Lighter somehow. Like a weight got lifted. The weight of losing everything will do that. No, I think it's more than that. I think it's knowing that someone in this family stepped up when it mattered. That when everything was falling apart, you caught it. Kevin appeared in the kitchen doorway, hovering like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how to start. "What's up?" I asked. "I wanted to talk to you. About the job thing." He leaned against the doorframe, hands shoved in his pockets. "You're right. It's been too long. I don't know, maybe I was scared of starting over again. Maybe I got too comfortable. But that's not fair to you, or to Mom and Dad. It's not about fair, Kevin. It's about everyone contributing what they can. I know. And I want to. I've actually been thinking about going back to school, maybe getting certified in HVAC or electrical work. Something stable." He looked out the window where Dad was helping the kids build a bigger leaf pile. "I don't want to be 40 and still living with my parents in my sister's house." "Ashley's okay with that plan?" "Ashley's been pushing me to do something like this for months. She's been working extra hours to pick up my slack, and that's not fair to her either." He straightened up. "I'm going to call the community college on Monday. See about spring enrollment." I nodded. That sounds like a good start. "And Sarah? Thank you for saving this place, for not throwing us out when you had every right to, for still treating us like family even when we weren't acting like it." After Kevin left, Mom and I finished the dishes in comfortable silence. The kitchen felt peaceful now, like the tension that had been building for months had finally been released. "Do you want to take some leftovers home?" Mom asked, already reaching for containers. "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "I was thinking maybe the kids and I could stay the night. If that's okay with you." Mom's face lit up. "Of course it's okay. It's your house." "It's not about that anymore. It's about wanting to wake up Christmas morning here, like we used to when I was little. Tommy and Lily would love that. So would I." That evening we all watched a movie together in the living room. Not the Disney marathon that had been planned for the den, but a family comedy that everyone could enjoy. Tommy and Lily curled up with their grandparents on the couch, while the adults claimed chairs and floor space around the coffee table. When it came time for bed, Ashley showed me to my old room, which she'd been using as a craft space. "I can clear this out," she said quickly. "Move my stuff back to Kevin's room." "Just for tonight," I said. "We can figure out a better long-term arrangement later." "Actually," she said, pausing in the doorway, "I've been thinking maybe Kevin and I should look for our own place anyway. Not because you're making us leave, but because it might be better for everyone if we had some independence. That's up to you guys. There's no rush." "I know. But I think Kevin needs to feel like he's building something for himself, not just living in someone else's space. And honestly, I think your parents might enjoy having their house back to themselves, at least mostly." She was probably right. The arrangement that had made sense during crisis mode might not be the best solution for the long term. But that could all be worked out later, when emotions weren't running so high and everyone had time to adjust to the new reality. I tucked Tommy and Lily into sleeping bags on the floor of my old room, something they found incredibly exciting, even though they had perfectly good beds at home. They whispered and giggled until exhaustion finally overtook excitement, and then the house settled into the kind of quiet that only comes after big changes. I lay awake for a while, listening to my children breathe and thinking about the deed still folded in my purse downstairs. 6 months ago, I'd signed those papers in a lawyer's office, thinking I was saving my parents' house. Today, I'd realized I was also saving my place in the family. The next morning, Dad made his famous pancakes while Mom brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Kevin appeared in the kitchen wearing actual pants instead of pajamas, already looking more purposeful than he had in months. Ashley helped Tommy and Lily set the table, letting them arrange the syrup and butter exactly how they wanted. Over breakfast, we talked about Christmas plans. Real plans, with everyone included from the start. Michelle volunteered to coordinate the gift exchange. Kevin and Ashley offered to handle decorations, with my approval for any major changes. Mom wanted to try a new stuffing recipe she'd found online. "What about Christmas Eve?" Lily asked. "Can we still do Christmas Eve here?" "If you want to," I said. "We can do whatever makes everyone happy." "I want to sleep over again," Tommy declared. "In sleeping bags. That can probably be arranged." After breakfast, Kevin pulled me aside while the others were getting ready to leave for their various post-Thanksgiving obligations. "I called the community college," he said. "They have an information session for their winter enrollment next Tuesday. Ashley's gonna drive me." "That's great, Kev." "And I called my old supervisor at the electrical company. He said they might have some apprentice positions opening up after the new year, if I'm serious about getting certified." "Are you serious about it?" He nodded. "Yeah, I think I am. For the first time in a long time, I actually want to work towards something instead of just existing." Before we left that afternoon, Dad pulled me into his workshop in the garage. It still smelled like motor oil and sawdust, exactly like it had when I was little, and would watch him fix everything that broke in our house. "I want you to have this," he said, holding out a key ring with 3 keys on it. "Front door, back door, and garage." "Dad, I already have keys." "Not house keys, home keys." He pressed them into my palm. "I want you to know that you're always welcome here. Not because you own the place, but because you're my daughter, and this is your home." I looked down at the keys, feeling their weight. "Thank you. And Sarah, I'm proud of you. For what you did for us, yes, but mostly for standing up for yourself today, for not letting us take you for granted anymore." 6 months later, Kevin graduated from his certification program and got hired full-time at the electrical company. He and Ashley moved into a small apartment across town, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to feel independent. They still come for Sunday dinners, but now they bring groceries and help cook, instead of just showing up to eat. Mom and Dad enjoy having their house mostly to themselves again, but Tommy and Lily spend every other weekend there, helping with projects and learning to play cards, and getting spoiled by grandparents who remember how to be grandparents instead of overwhelmed caregivers. Michelle and I have grown closer too, probably because the family dynamics are healthier overall, and there's less stress affecting everyone's relationships. As for me, I kept my apartment, but I also kept the house. It's nice knowing I have both options, nice knowing my kids have a place that's theirs by right instead of by permission. The deed is still in my purse, not because I need to prove anything anymore, but because it reminds me that sometimes love means making hard choices, and sometimes it means standing up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable. Last Thanksgiving, we had 12 people around that dining room table. Everyone had a place, everyone belonged, and no one had to eat off TV trays unless they wanted to. Tommy said grace, thanking God for family and houses and second chances. Lily added thanks for sleeping bags and Grandpa's pancakes, and the fact that sometimes grown-ups figure out how to be nice to each other. When I think back to that moment when I pulled out the deed, I don't remember feeling angry or triumphant. Mostly, I remember feeling tired. Tired of being invisible, tired of being taken for granted, tired of watching my children learn that love means accepting whatever you're given without asking for what you deserve. But I also remember the moment afterward, when we reset that table for 9 people instead of 7, when my family remembered how to make room for everyone. When my house became home again, not just for me, but for all of us. Sometimes the most important documents you carry aren't the ones you plan to use. Sometimes they're just there to remind you of what you're worth, and what you won't accept anymore, and what you're willing to fight for when it matters most. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people who love you remember how to show it when you finally stop pretending that you don't need them to. The weeks following that Thanksgiving felt like living in a completely different universe. Kevin actually got up before noon on Monday and drove to the community college to pick up enrollment forms. Ashley started working full-time hours at the salon, instead of just filling in when someone called out sick. Mom called me 3 times that first week just to chat, not because she needed me to handle some crisis or mediate some family drama. But the biggest change was in how my parents treated Tommy and Lily. Dad started picking them up from school on Fridays, bringing them back to Maple Street where they'd help him with small projects around the house. Not because I asked him to, not because they needed supervision, but because he genuinely wanted to spend time with his grandchildren. He taught Tommy how to use a level and showed Lily how to identify different types of screws. Basic stuff that grandfathers should teach grandchildren, but that had somehow gotten lost in the chaos of Kevin's extended adolescence and my parents' financial stress. Mom had them help her bake cookies for the church fundraiser, measuring flour and cracking eggs with the focused intensity that children bring to important tasks. She let them lick the beaters and didn't worry about the flour dusting every surface in her kitchen. When I picked them up Sunday evening, they were covered in chocolate chips and stories about how Grandma let them eat cookie dough straight from the bowl. It was like watching my parents remember who they used to be before medical bills and unemployment and pride made everything complicated. They had energy again, patience again, joy again. The house felt lighter when I walked through it, less like a place where people were just surviving, and more like a place where people actually lived. Kevin started his classes in January, and I have to admit I was skeptical. He talked about going back to school before, usually when Ashley was particularly frustrated with his lack of direction, or when Mom was dropping hints about him contributing more to household expenses. But this time felt different. He bought actual textbooks instead of just planning to borrow someone else's. He set up a study schedule and stuck to it. He asked Dad to quiz him on electrical code basics while they watched television in the evenings. Ashley transformed too, but in a quieter way. She stopped trying so hard to prove that she belonged in the house, stopped over-decorating and over-hosting and over-managing everyone else's comfort. Instead, she focused on taking care of Kevin in ways that seemed to actually help him succeed rather than enable his continued dependence. She drove him to classes when his car wouldn't start. She made sure he had coffee and breakfast before early morning labs. She celebrated his good test scores like they were personal victories for both of them. The dynamic between Ashley and me took longer to settle into something comfortable. She'd spent 3 years thinking of herself as the daughter-in-law who was helping to hold the family together. And discovering that I'd been holding everything together from behind the scenes left her feeling foolish and defensive. We had an awkward conversation in Mom's kitchen one Saturday afternoon while the kids were outside with their grandfather. I keep thinking about all the times I rearranged furniture or picked paint colors or planned family gatherings, she said, scrubbing the same clean counter for the 3rd time. All those decisions I made about your house without even thinking to ask you. You didn't know it was my house, I pointed out, though I appreciated the acknowledgement. But I should have known it wasn't mine. She stopped scrubbing and looked at me directly. I think I got caught up in playing house, you know? Kevin and I have been together for 5 years, but we've never actually had our own place. We went from my parents' house to your parents' house, and I never had to figure out how to be a real adult. It was a surprisingly honest admission from someone I'd always seen as supremely confident in her choices. What's going to change now? Everything, I hope. She folded the dish rag neatly and hung it on the hook by the sink. Kevin getting his certification is just the first step. We're looking at apartments, real apartments that we can afford on our own. Nothing fancy, but something that's ours. How do you feel about that? Terrified, she admitted with a laugh, but also excited. I want to know what it feels like to pay our own rent, buy our own groceries, make our own decisions about how we want to live. I want Kevin to know what it feels like too. By March, they'd found a small 2-bedroom apartment in a complex about 15 minutes away. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, but Ashley attacked the decorating project with the same enthusiasm she'd brought to my parents' house, except this time she was working within a budget that actually belonged to her and Kevin. She haunted thrift stores and estate sales, finding pieces that could be painted or reupholstered or repurposed into something that matched her vision. Kevin seemed to grow 3 inches taller the day they signed their lease. He'd been working part-time for the electrical company since February, doing basic installation work under supervision while he finished his coursework. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and he came home tired in the way that people get tired from accomplishing things rather than from avoiding them. Mom cried the day they moved out, but they were happy tears mixed with relieved tears. She and Dad helped load the moving truck, carrying boxes and offering unsolicited advice about apartment living and budgeting and the importance of renter's insurance. As we watched Kevin and Ashley drive away with everything they owned packed into a U-Haul, Mom leaned against Dad's shoulder. "Think they'll be okay?" she asked. "They'll figure it out," Dad replied. "And if they don't, they'll figure that out too." It was exactly the kind of confidence in their ability to handle their own lives that Kevin and Ashley had needed to hear for years. The kind of confidence that said, "We believe you can succeed, but we also believe you can handle failure if that's what happens." The kind of confidence that treats people like adults instead of children who need constant protection from consequences. With Kevin and Ashley gone, the house on Maple Street settled into a new rhythm. Mom and Dad rediscovered what it was like to live as a couple, instead of as overwhelmed caregivers managing a household full of dependents. They started taking evening walks around the neighborhood, something they hadn't done since before Dad's heart attack. They planned small weekend trips to visit friends they hadn't seen in years. They talked about maybe getting a dog, something they'd always said they'd do when they had more time and space. Tommy and Lily still spent every other weekend there, but now their visits felt special rather than obligatory. Grandma and Grandpa had energy for them, attention for them, patience for their questions and projects, and the general chaos that comes with children who feel completely comfortable in a space. Dad taught Tommy how to change a tire and check the oil in his car. Mom let Lily help plan and plant a vegetable garden in the backyard, something she'd been wanting to do for years, but never had the time or energy to attempt. My relationship with my parents shifted too, becoming less about crisis management and more about actual connection. Mom called me to ask what I thought about a book she was reading, or to tell me about something funny that happened at the grocery store. Dad started sending me articles about tax law changes that might affect my accounting business. Not because he needed my help interpreting them, but because he was interested in what I did for work and wanted to understand it better. For the first time in years, conversations with my parents weren't centered around problems that needed solving, or bills that needed paying, or family members who needed managing. We talked about movies and politics and childhood memories and plans for the future. We talked like adults who chose to spend time together rather than like people trapped in obligations they couldn't escape. The financial arrangement around the house evolved too. Initially, I'd planned to keep paying the mortgage indefinitely, treating it as my contribution to family stability. But as Dad's health improved and their expenses decreased with Kevin and Ashley living independently, my parents wanted to start contributing more to their own housing costs. We worked out a system where they paid what they could afford each month, and I covered the difference. It wasn't about the money so much as it was about dignity and partnership, and everyone feeling like they were contributing according to their ability. Michelle noticed the changes during our monthly sister coffee dates, something we'd started doing after Thanksgiving as a way to rebuild our relationship outside of family gatherings and crisis situations. "Everyone seems so much happier," she said, stirring sugar into her latte. Like, genuinely happier, not just pretending for the sake of family harmony happier. "I think people feel like they can breathe again," I said. Like they're not walking on eggshells or performing roles that don't actually fit them. Mom and Dad seem like themselves again, like who they were before everything got so complicated. It was true. My parents had spent years feeling like failures because they couldn't solve their son's unemployment or their own financial problems, or the general sense that their family was falling apart. Now they were just grandparents and spouses and individuals with their own interests and opinions and energy for things that weren't crisis management. "And Kevin actually seems like he likes himself again," Michelle continued. "Remember how defensive he used to get about everything? Like he was constantly expecting someone to criticize him?" I remembered. Kevin had spent the last few years of his unemployment acting like everyone was judging him, which made him judge himself, which made him defensive and angry and generally unpleasant to be around. Now he talked about his work and his classes and his apartment with genuine pride. Not bragging, just the quiet satisfaction, that comes from building something for yourself. Ashley's different too, I said, less intense, like she doesn't have to prove anything anymore. Because she doesn't. She's not trying to justify her place in someone else's house or someone else's family. She's just living her own life. By summer, the new normal felt actually normal, rather than like something we were all trying to adjust to. Kevin graduated from his certification program and got promoted to full-time status at the electrical company. Ashley had been promoted to assistant manager at the salon and was talking about maybe taking some business classes herself. They bought their first real furniture, a couch that they'd saved up for, rather than something handed down or found at a garage sale. Tommy and Lily started talking about their weekend visits to Grandma and Grandpa's house, with the same excitement they used to reserve for trips to Disneyland. Not because anything particularly thrilling happened there, but because they had their grandparents' full attention and unlimited access to the garage workshop and garden and all the patient answers to questions that children need adults to provide. The house itself seemed different too. With fewer people living there full-time, it felt spacious and peaceful rather than crowded and chaotic. Mom had reclaimed her sewing room, setting up a proper workspace where she could work on quilting projects that had been packed away for years. Dad organized his workshop properly for the first time since Kevin had moved back home, creating dedicated spaces for different types of projects and tools. They hosted a barbecue for the 4th of July, inviting extended family and neighbors and friends from church. It was the first time in years that they'd felt comfortable having people over, the first time they'd had the energy and space and financial stability to open their home for pure social reasons, rather than obligation or crisis management. I watched Dad flip burgers on the grill he'd been wanting to replace for years, but finally could afford to. Watched Mom chat with neighbors she hadn't seen socially in months. Watched Tommy and Lily run around the backyard with their cousins and neighborhood kids. Kevin and Ashley brought potato salad and stayed for the entire afternoon, comfortable and included but not central to every conversation or decision. It struck me that this was what family gatherings were supposed to feel like. People choosing to spend time together because they enjoyed each other's company, not because duty or obligation or financial dependence forced them into the same space. People contributing what they could and receiving what they needed, without keeping careful score of who owed what to whom. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the kids were in bed, I sat on the back porch with my parents while Dad finished his beer and Mom worked on a crossword puzzle. The conversation meandered comfortably between topics, the kind of rambling discussion that happens when people have time and aren't rushing toward the next crisis or obligation. "I keep thinking about last Thanksgiving," Mom said suddenly. "How terrible that was. How close we came to losing you entirely." "You weren't going to lose me," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. If the deed revelation hadn't changed things, if my family had continued treating me like an outsider, who was useful only for financial bailouts and crisis management, I might have eventually decided that the relationship wasn't worth maintaining. "We might have," Dad said quietly, "and it would have been our own damn fault." "I think everyone was just trying to survive," I said diplomatically. "Surviving isn't the same as living," Mom replied. "We spent so long focused on just getting through each day that we forgot how to actually live with each other, how to enjoy each other." It was a surprisingly profound observation from someone who usually avoided analyzing family dynamics in favor of just trying to keep everyone happy and fed and minimally functional. "What's different now?" I asked. Dad considered the question while watching fireflies blink in the growing darkness. "I think everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing instead of what they think other people want them to do. Kevin's working because he wants to work, not because we're nagging him about it. Ashley's focused on her own life instead of trying to manage ours. You're here because you want to be here, not because we need you to fix something. And you and Mom? We're remembering how to be married instead of just being crisis managers," Mom said. "It's nice to have conversations that aren't about money or Kevin's job prospects or who's going to handle the next emergency." As August faded into September, I found myself looking forward to the holidays with anticipation rather than dread. Not because I expected everything to be perfect, but because I trusted that we'd figured out how to navigate problems without destroying relationships. We'd learned how to include everyone without enabling anyone. We'd found a balance between supporting each other and maintaining individual independence. Kevin called me on a Tuesday evening in late September, something that would have been unthinkable a year earlier when most of our conversations happened through other family members or during obligatory holiday gatherings. "I wanted to run something by you," he said without preamble. "Ashley and I have been talking about maybe hosting Thanksgiving this year. Nothing fancy, just family, but in our apartment." It was such a normal request, the kind of thing that functional families discuss every year without drama or complicated logistics. But for us, it represented a fundamental shift. Kevin wasn't asking me to solve a problem, or mediate a conflict, or provide financial assistance. He was asking me to be a guest at something he and Ashley wanted to host. "That sounds really nice," I said. "What can I bring?" "Actually, would you mind making your grandmother's sweet potato casserole? I know Ashley tried to recreate it last year, but it wasn't the same. I think some recipes just belong to certain people." It was such a small thing, being asked to contribute a specific dish because my family actually wanted what I could provide rather than just tolerating my presence. But it felt like coming full circle, like final confirmation that I belonged in this family not because of what I could fix or fund, but because of who I was. "I'd love to make the casserole," I said. "Should I bring anything else?" "Just yourselves. And maybe that card game Tommy's been trying to teach everyone." Ashley bought a new dining table, and she's been dying to have enough people over to actually use all the chairs. After we hung up, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd been invited to a family gathering as a guest, rather than as the person responsible for making sure everything worked out okay. It felt simultaneously foreign and completely natural, like remembering how to ride a bicycle after years of walking everywhere. September turned into October, and the anticipation of a different kind of Thanksgiving continued to build. Not the anxious anticipation of wondering whether I'd be welcome or included or treated with basic respect, but the pleasant anticipation of spending time with people I genuinely enjoyed being around. Mom called to ask what kind of wine I preferred, because she wanted to bring something I'd actually drink rather than just whatever was on sale. Dad mentioned that he was looking forward to seeing how Kevin and Ashley had set up their apartment, something he'd been curious about but too polite to ask for a tour of earlier. Michelle suggested we coordinate our arrivals so the cousins could play together before dinner, a practical consideration that would have been impossible during the years when family logistics were complicated by resentment and financial strain and unclear boundaries. Even Tommy and Lily seemed to sense that this Thanksgiving would be different. They talked about Uncle Kevin's new apartment and wondered whether Ashley would let them help cook something, and debated what games they wanted to bring to play after dinner. Normal childhood excitement about a family gathering, unmarked by the anxiety and confusion that had characterized previous holidays. As October progressed, I found myself thinking less about the previous Thanksgiving's drama and more about how far we'd all come. Kevin had a job he was good at and seemed to enjoy. Ashley had her own life and interests and identity outside of managing other people's problems. My parents had rediscovered their marriage and their individual personalities and their enjoyment of being grandparents. Michelle and I had developed an actual friendship based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. And me? I had a family that wanted me around for who I was rather than what I could provide. I had children who were learning that love should feel welcoming and generous rather than conditional and complicated. I had a house that felt like home, and relationships that felt sustainable, and a life that felt intentionally chosen rather than accidentally survived. The deed to the house was still in my purse, not because I needed to prove ownership anymore, but because it reminded me of what I'd been willing to do for people I loved and what I was no longer willing to accept in return. It was a symbol of both generosity and boundaries, of love that costs something, and respect that can't be taken for granted. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd never pulled out that deed, if I'd just accepted the TV trays and the exclusion and the general sense that my place in the family was whatever space was left over after everyone else got what they wanted. Would Kevin have ever found motivation to change his life? Would Ashley have ever realized that playing house in someone else's home wasn't the same as building a life with her husband? Would my parents have ever rediscovered their own identity outside of crisis management? I'd never know, and it didn't matter. What mattered was that we'd all learned something important about love and respect and what it means to be family. What mattered was that we'd found a way to care for each other without losing ourselves in the process. As November approached and Thanksgiving planning began in earnest, I felt something I hadn't felt during the holidays in years. Pure anticipation. No anxiety about whether I'd be included, no stress about whether I'd have to manage everyone else's emotions, no exhaustion from trying to prove I deserved a place at the table. Just excitement about spending time with people I loved, people who loved me back in ways that felt generous rather than grudging. Just gratitude for second chances and new beginnings, and the surprising resilience of families who are willing to do the hard work of treating each other better. Just the simple pleasure of looking forward to going home for the holidays, knowing that home was wherever these people chose to gather, and knowing that I'd always have a place there. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.